Yeah, so I was invited to speak a while ago, and I wanted to present some topics that I felt were relevant right now, things that we're seeing in the industry that would affect all or most of you, not only professionally, but possibly personally as well. And you'll see that as I get into it. Ways in which we see criminals, and happens all the time, ways in which we see criminals taking advantage of bad situations, frankly. So let me get into some of the details here. What we're seeing first, obviously, is this the shift, what I call the shift to digital. And we were already seeing this prior to the pandemic, where we saw, especially in the e-commerce space, where we saw this shift to digital transactions, but delivery of that service or that product locally or through a brick and mortar store. Grocery stores where I could order online, drive and pick up the groceries, or even possibly even have them delivered. Situations where we saw, some 60 plus, 70 plus million U.S. households that are, have Amazon Prime memberships. Why is that? Because this ability to purchase easily while I'm at home through my mobile device, and then have that free, 2-day or less delivery. And what we've seen here is the shift to digital, and this is from a payments.com survey. They said this shift to digital, we're seeing it across all the different categories that they track. Most of this is kind of consumer-based stuff, but this shift to digital, and more importantly, the fact that we don't see this changing even after the pandemic is over. That more and more business is transacting online because of the pandemic, but in my opinion, really only accelerated what was already happening. We're all this accelerating shift. These again are stats from some of the surveys they did, but 60% of consumers who said they'll continue shopping online at the same level after the outbreak. All of this pointing to that the pandemic is really only accelerating this shift to digital. And really all this is driving home the point that, again, more and more business is transacting online than ever before. More and more we're relying on that digital transaction to power our business, to be the source of revenue for so many businesses. And not only in business and the things that we buy, but how we're working as well. We've heard several different comments from several different large employers, Facebook included, saying, "Hey, we're going to have a large percent of our workforce telecommuting even after the pandemic is over." So there's this significant shift to digital consumption of resources and services that has been accelerated by this pandemic. So what are the two biggest threats to this digital shift? What I'm seeing based on attacks and threats and talking to customers. In my role, I get to, used to fly around, not so much anymore, but travel around to the who's who of the financial industry, of the tech industry, and talk to their InfoSec teams about the problems that they're seeing, how they're trying to mitigate those. And what I'm seeing, these have historically kind of been bigger threats, but they're really, really important now because of the ways in which these threats are tweaking the way we do business, and the fact that more and more of that business is happening online. So automated threats, automated attacks, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. If not, we'll get into details on both of these. And of course, browser malware and software supply chain. Now, these are two different types of malware, but they really do the same thing, where they're injecting content into the browser of the end user. And there's also another piece here where this is happening outside of what you historically think of as your data center. And we'll talk about why that's a problem here in just a second. So bots and automated attack. Quickly, just I'm going to go through some of this very quickly, just so you understand, make sure everyone's on the same playing field as far as understanding what we're talking about when I say bot. A lot of times we think of botnets, a bunch of IoT devices have been compromised and they're attacking some website, some sort of denial of service attack. But really, it's anything that's automated. It's not a human behind a browser. It's there's lots of good bots, obviously, search engines and those types of things. But this automated traffic is really what's the powerhouse of most of the attacks that we're seeing. Like I said, keep in mind there's lots of good bots, chat bots, search engines, those types of things. There's lots of legitimate automated traffic, but the single biggest threat is this attack automation. We know about half of the traffic on the internet is some sort of automated traffic. About 30% of that automated traffic is malicious. And we know from like Verizon breach report in the past few years and whatnot, the bulk of attacks are started by some sort of reconnaissance from some sort of automated botnet. We're out there scanning the internet looking for vulnerable things. This is really a problem. When I spin up my honeypots in AWS or Azure or whatever, from the time that honeypot is up and listening on, say, port 80 or 443 until the time it's getting hit with the noise of the internet is almost always under 1 minute. It's typically 45 to 60 seconds from the time it's listening on port 80 or 443 till it's just getting hit with the noise of the internet. And this is a honeypot out there with no DNS entry, no marketing, nothing driving traffic to it. It's just that noise of the internet. So what does this mean? This really causes a problem from a business perspective because it's difficult to know if you're serving your actual customers or you're serving bots. And there's a lot of different ways that this can skew not only business decisions, but also security knowledge, security decisions, security information. We talk about data being the new gold, that we have to kind of dig through this data, especially as we make decisions on where to invest for the things that appear to be making the most money. You know, we've seen it many, many times where a given customer thought that there was a certain conversion rate on some marketing tool or marketing scheme or something, filling out a form online. And once we get rid of the automated traffic, it turns out that what they thought was a 12% conversion rate maybe was a 6% conversion rate for this marketing campaign. And because so much of that was being automated, bots filling out their forms, if you will. Talking about polluting those metrics, as example, maybe we are looking at how much traffic is going to a specific marketing campaign, how much traffic is going to a certain item in or a certain page, a URL, and then not completing the process that a normal user might complete. Different things that could skew our business intelligence, and we'll get into some of that in a little bit more detail. Obviously, you know, the nefarious things as well. You know, stealing intellectual property, brand integrity, all those types of things. So lots of different things that we might have competitors polluting our data. There's phishers and IP thieves. It definitely can not only inform the business intelligence, having this visibility into how much of our traffic is automated, but also our security decisions that we make, the rest of our security stack. And I'll explain what I mean here in a minute. So first of all, this performance. If we think about, and what I'm seeing from working with customers is on the average website, anywhere from 15 to 30% of the traffic to a website is what I call unwanted automated traffic. I don't like to call it bots or bad traffic or something like that, but because there's traffic that's automated that's not inherently malicious. They're not trying to do bad things. They're not trying to break in, but it's just unwanted automated traffic, the noise of the internet. So let's think about if 30%, 15% of the traffic coming to my site is unwanted automated traffic. That means 15 or 30% of the infrastructure to support that application is there to serve unwanted traffic. 15 to 30% of my storage, my compute, my bandwidth is all there to serve unwanted automated traffic. And especially think about that in the cloud where there's a meter on that compute, on that storage, on that, you know, that bandwidth. There's a real cost to the business, just a general problem of bots. There's also these more specific targeted problems. So everyone, in my opinion, has a general bot problem. There's just so much automated traffic on the internet, the noise of the internet, the scanners. Everyone has this cost of bots problem. The other general problem that everyone has is from a security perspective, not from a real threat from these bots, if you will, but the fact that they're creating so much noise. If I were to ask any one of you, if you could, within your organization, get a feel for how many logs a day are in your web application firewall or your next-gen firewall from an application perspective, I'm guessing it's anywhere from thousands to tens of thousands of logs a day. So what's the security value of any one of those logs? Really, it's almost nothing. No one's looking at those logs. There's too many of them. We're only going to look at those logs after the breach to see if we should have seen it. Did we catch it? Should we have, reviewed these better? If we can get rid of all this noise of the internet, all that's left in our security stack, we know, is now a human behind a browser. Now, instead of having thousands of logs a day, we've got 10 or 20 or 30 or 100. And because of the nature of those security logs, we know it's a real threat. A human manually poking around on my website, I have to make the time to look at those logs. So this really informs not only the business, but also your InfoSec team to know what are the real threats, getting rid of all the noise and the script kiddies and digging into the real threats that are attacking, really enhancing the value of the whole rest of your security stack, if you will. And then the main problem we're seeing from bots is this, credential stuffing. This is something that every industry is dealing with, but it's certainly, we're seeing a marked targeting of the financial industry. They've always been targeted, but there's been some shifts recently, especially with the pandemic, that I'll get into here in just a minute. But this overall general shift, or this general increase in credential stuffing that's targeting the financial industry. I'm pretty sure everyone's familiar with credential stuffing, but there's billions of leaked credentials out there. If you haven't been to haveibeenpwned.com or one of those sites, and they're replaying these credentials against your login page. What I'm seeing from talking to customers and my own research is basically if you have a login page exposed to the internet, someone's shoving credentials into it. And they're getting more and more sophisticated based on the liquidity of those assets behind that login page. How quickly can I monetize what is behind that login page? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bank account. Obviously, that's easy money. It's instantly monetizable, but there's lots of other data that you might think isn't monetizable, but for example, here's one I still haven't wrapped my head around. We have a lot of online dating sites that we work with that have, in the recent 6 to 12 months, really noticed this automated creation by bots of accounts in these online dating sites. I still haven't quite figured out how they're trying to monetize that, or maybe it's just a propaganda, part of a propaganda campaign. I'm not sure, but interesting to see why and what they would do with online dating accounts, right? All right, so browser software and malware and software supply chain malware. And these are really two different things, but I want to make sure I'm tying these together because I feel like they both sort of affect the same problem in that they're not visible to you inside your data center. So first, there's this man in the browser malware. Some of you, especially if you're in the finance industry, may be very familiar with this. It's been around for a very long time. There's lots of different variants: Zeus, Dridex, Citadel. Trying to think of some of the other ones that I don't have listed here. Ramnet. Trying to think of another one. Anyway, again, this is historically targeted the financial industry, but we've even seen some shifts here, and we'll get into some of that. And then there's the software supply chain attacks. These are trying to inject additional JavaScript somewhere within the web pages of your application, typically targeting shopping carts and trying to skim credit card data and these types of things. Again, this is another place where it's been around for a while, but we're seeing a shift because of the pandemic. And I'll talk to you a little bit about those. Again, this targets several different industries. Again, primarily targeting shopping cart data, but we've also seen it skim other data from various websites. All of these are probably ones that you've heard of in the recent, past couple of years. I'll talk a little bit about the Newegg one here in a minute, because there's some interesting information around that one that everyone should be aware of. And then not a lot of variants. Everyone's primarily familiar with MageCart. Cart Thief is a slightly newer variant of MageCart, possibly by the same developers. And then there's others, one or two others, likely going to be many, many more as they find other shopping cart software that's used across the industry. The other problem here is the extent of this problem from a software supply chain is huge. This is, again, from another dark reading article. 51% of JavaScript components had a known vulnerability. And especially as you consider that a lot of the JavaScript that's being used in your application isn't something that's homegrown, something that you wrote internally. There's especially over the past few years, there's been this huge increase in the use of open source JavaScript, right? I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. Someone's already solved this problem for me. Let's go ahead and use their JavaScript. And then, of course, at one point in October, their research showed that there were over 2 million websites that showed signs of MageCart skimmers, and that actually has gotten worse in recent months. And it's because of who and what they're targeting. And we'll get into that in just a minute here. So how it works. I want to get into this a little bit just so you guys understand. And this isn't just a business problem. This is something that could affect you as an individual personally. If you have this type of malware on your computer or your mobile device, it's something that could be affecting you or people you know. Devon, real quick, I noticed my video flicker a few times. Is my audio okay? Am I breaking up at all?
No, sir. Seems to be clear on my side.
All right, good deal. So this man-in-the-browser malware. So what happens is the user's device is infected. And this is one big difference between this man-in-the-browser malware and the software supply chain, is where is the infection happening? The difference is with man-in-the-browser malware, the end user's computer is infected, right? Through some drive-by website download or malware in an email attachment or something along those lines. Somehow this end user's device is infected, right? Then they go call the URL, and this malware is watching for calls to that URL. And what's happening is it's injecting additional content into this page. It's either a blank iframe over the top to skim the data, or maybe the login page is asking for username and password, and now for some reason everything looks right. It still has the right SSL certificate, everything looks good, but now suddenly it's asking me for my PIN number if it's a bank account, or it's asking for my social security number, a lot of other information, right? It's injecting all these additional form fields, and because this is still SSL, it has the right certificate, there's nothing that looks wrong about this. I'm just seeing it ask for some new weird information. And a lot of times these type of attacks, they'll say, hey, there's a problem with your account. We need you to enter this additional information to verify you are who you say you are, right? And then the user, of course, enters that information into the field. And then when they go to submit that, yes, they log into the website, but they're also sending that information to the attacker's command and control server. So again, this man-in-the-browser malware is affecting the end computer. The big part here, though, is all of this is happening on the end device, outside of your data center. You may have all the right tools and security stack here, but you have no idea, no visibility that this is happening out on the browser's malware. And you may think, well, the end user's device, this isn't affecting me, but the reality is this malware is collecting information from your site on the user side, going through a hacker's command and control server and building a database. And what it's going to look like to the end community is, hey, there was a breach of company X, and all their data is now on some site available for download on the dark web, right? Now, software supply chain attacks. Let's talk about how these work a little bit. So first, we call our web page and we get the HTML back, which then results in subsequent requests for images and style sheets and JavaScript, right? All these different things that eventually result in the page loading. And we may have done a very, very good job of building that security stack, that fortress walls around our application. We've got our, IDS, IPS, our next-gen firewall, our WAF. We've done, our software analysis. We've done our testing. Everything looks good. But then again, and I'm sure all of you are aware of this, it's not just content from your app that's being pulled. That HTML is saying, hey, go call some content from Google Analytics to give us some information, or some other third-party script. This is very common on sites where they're selling ad space or something. The marketing team is doing this outside of the control of the app developers. And so, and even more importantly, and we see this all the time, that third-party JavaScript may be calling some fourth-party JavaScript, and some all the way down to like eighth-party JavaScript. There's this huge tree of JavaScript calling JavaScript. And so we call that fourth-party JavaScript, and then we eventually get, okay, this all loads as this nice, pretty web page, right? So enter the obligatory hacker with his hood, and now he's going to infect possibly that backend app. And actually in one of those, I'm trying to remember if that was the Macy's attack or the British Airways attack, one of those two, they were actually able to get their call to their JavaScript inside of the app itself. But let's assume you've done a good job of protecting that app, and that's not where they've got it. Reality is they're probably going to infect either, and they're not really infect. I hate to use the word infect because they're not really adding some additional malware to this. All they've got to do is get a single line in there saying, hey, go call my JavaScript. Of course, they could also this fourth-party JavaScript. And if we talk about that Newegg attack, what happened was they even registered a new domain, and the name of the domain was Newegg Stats. Sounds legit to me. They even were able to get an SSL certificate. So everything about the call to this fourth-party JavaScript was going to what seemed like a valid domain, neweggstats.com, and this is what was loading the mage cart that was then, they call that JavaScript. The user enters their credit card information, and yes, the application processes it. They are able to make their purchase and everything, but that credit card information now went to hackers command and control server. I'm going to pause for just a second. Are there any questions that maybe I should ask? I realize that I hadn't paused yet. Any questions that I should ask online? Any questions? Someone was talking about British Airways, good deal. It looks like there's no questions. I'm going to pause right here before I get into sort of what we're seeing right now. Any questions? All right, looks like I will continue then. So what are we seeing? Definitely this shifting trend around COVID. First, general shift in targets. The credential stuffing attacks that we have historically seen against larger banks. And this isn't to say that smaller regional banks and credit unions weren't targeted before, but there is a very noticeable, measurable, significant shift toward these smaller banks and credit unions. I have spent, I would say 50% of my time over the past 4 months working with various small regional credit unions and banks that are targets of these credential stuffing attacks. It is nonstop and ongoing, and we're even obviously seeing the same attackers through various ways of identification attacking the same small regional banks. Interestingly enough, they seem to be targeting the same regions themselves. We'll see a group of attackers that are primarily using attack proxies in Southeast Asia, hitting banks in, say, the Pacific Northwest area of the United States. So for whatever reason, they seem to be targeting certain areas. But the reality is they're targeting much smaller banks who aren't used to dealing with this level of attack. A lot of this is around the idea that for various reasons, we're seeing a lot more financial business happening, even with these smaller banks during the pandemic, and the attackers are looking to take advantage of that. In a minute, I'll show you an example of that was very creative from an attacker perspective. And then now the mage card attacks. This is something we've seen a shift in the past, but again, this shift to smaller targets where they were, we talked about British Airways and Macy's and all these types of things. Now we're seeing them go after other shopping cart software. A lot of the mage cart was targeting anyone that was using Magento. There were some known vulnerabilities in several of the earlier versions. And so anyone who was using that really was vulnerable to those mage cart attacks. Now we're seeing them handpick other shopping cart type software that's used across multiple customers and looking for exploits in those. And then they're attacking that exploit across tons of different similar targets. And then the man-in browser malware. Malware that is historically, targeting, say, the financial industry, shifting, especially during the holiday seasons, to e-commerce and hospitality targets. So this big shift, and we're expecting to see this even a much bigger shift this next shopping season and throughout the fall even. So some examples: credential stuffing attack against a very small credit union, somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 million in total assets. Very, very small, even for a credit union. Most credit unions are, in the, billions of dollars in total assets, and very, very common for the aggregators to try and, I shouldn't say try, aggregators like the Yodleys, the Intuits, Finicity, Plaid, etc., to grab information from various financial customers to aggregate all of my information. What's my net worth? Here's what's in my Chase account and in my E-Trade account, all those types of things, right? Typically, they send these login attempts in batches, and that's what you're seeing here. The same time every day, we have these batches where we're updating all the accounts that we have. This is actually a very low level batch here because of the size of this credit union. There weren't a lot of customers. You can see this number of transactions per hour is really, really low, and this was actually from even a smaller one of the aggregators. Probably the reason the attackers did it this way. But we were noticing typically the total failures, login failures, you can see this little red mark right here, increase when the total number of logins increase. But we were seeing something really interesting here where the number of failed logins were increasing when there wasn't this batch process, right? This is normal. This little red spike of failed logins when the total of number of logins increases is normal. This spike of failed logins was really weird. And so when we took out these spikes, if you will, this normal batch traffic, and we looked between there, we were seeing an insanely low success rate for successful logins. And really what we discovered here is the attackers weren't attacking the credit union directly. They had compromised the account creation process at the aggregator and were using the aggregator to attack the credit union under the assumption that they're allowing traffic from the aggregators and probably less scrutiny to this traffic. We've seen this type of attack before, but never against such a small target. So very interesting attack here. And just again, anecdotal evidence of this shift to smaller targets. Mage card attack. Again, this is the shift to smaller targets, right? This was a vulnerability that was found in some bookstore management software at a university bookstore. And they were skimming, lots of student information, credit card information from this. And we noticed that this was software that was used across a lot of different credit unions. I mean, a lot of different bookstores. And so they were able to then look at other universities, and we saw this same variant of Mage, well, it was the Mage card, targeting the same bookstore management cost software at a lot of other universities. And then this man in the browser malware, we've talked about, this is historically targeted financial industry, really almost exclusively for many, many years. And then over the last few shopping seasons, this isn't one that's specific to COVID, but it's a trend that we're seeing that we're expecting to be even worse this year because of the pandemic. The idea that more and more, transactions are going to be happening online than ever before. So we expect a lot of the traditionally banking malware to target e-commerce. And these are some of the targets. For the first time a couple of years ago, we saw a financial malware where the large majority of its target URLs were actually not financial targets. They were all e-commerce. The reality is, if you were shopping anywhere online during the last few, holiday shopping seasons, the reality, if you had this malware, they probably were able to compromise some of your data. If you had your identity stolen in the past few shopping seasons, it was likely because of this type of malware. And you can see that this is really every site you might shop on, right? So let me stop right there and make sure there's no questions. Let's see, was the payment page outsourced to a PCI compliant service provider? Actually, that case, I believe it was. Are they talking about the payment? Sorry, Glenn, you asked the question about the payment page outsourced to a PCI. Are you talking about the credit union or the bookstore? Bookstore. Don't know that I have that specific piece. No, because the shopping cart and all of that was handled internally. The actual processing the credit card may have been sent via API call out to a third-party processor, but the collection of the credit card data was being done within the bookstore software, if that makes sense. So collecting the data, sending it off via API call to a credit card processor, getting the response back, and then presenting it inside of the book. Any other questions? Alrighty, so what can we do about it? First of all, bot protections. There's a lot out there. In fact, the reality is you probably already have something. There's various levels of capabilities in this bot space. And the reality is you can make a huge impact even with some very basic protections. Let's see. Oh, someone talking about background noise. Most of the bot protections out there that are included in your next-gen firewalls and some of your basic WAFs are really just using bot signatures. And those are, I would say, not super effective. They're going to get rid of a little bit of the noise, but not a whole lot. The next check actually isn't even listed here, and this is one that is extremely valuable. More and more of the bot providers are doing this, but it's something, in my opinion, if you're looking for a bot solution, you need to make sure that whatever bot provider you're doing is doing this, because it's a passive check of the headers, which means there's no chance that a JavaScript challenge or something like that is going to cause problems for your application, for end users, for valid non-browser traffic. And this is this check of the headers. So basically, we're looking at the user agent string in the header and saying, hey, you're telling me you're Chrome, but then we're looking at the presence and the order of the other headers in the request. You're telling me you're Chrome 75, but you've got your host header above your content type header or your accept encoding header. Chrome never sends those headers in that order. Or you're telling me you're Firefox. Well, I know Firefox always sends these other 3 or 4 headers. So this check of the presence and the order of the other headers is in my honeypots, that check is blocking 95% of the malicious traffic. So very powerful because it's passive and it's blocking so much of this noise of the internet. So some very basic things. Obviously, that was going to deal with a general bot problem. If you have a targeted bot problem where it is a source of legitimate fraud to your application, it is costing you money from a business perspective, then you're going to want a much more sophisticated bot protection. There's several out there, including some from F5. That's the reason we're sponsoring today. Are you blocking via code or via F5 product? There's actually both available. Obviously, we'd love to say it's an F5 product, but that's not what I'm here. This is just sort of improving your overall security posture. Yes, there are plugins for most of the web servers out there to do this check. I could probably pull off a few and send some more data on that, Matt, but I know there's like a plugin for Nginx, there's a plugin for HA proxy, there's lots. So to allow you to do those types of checks. We'll go on from there. Client-side malware detection and protection. This first one I really can't say enough about. The reality is both the man-in-the-browser malware and the MageCart all rely on injecting JavaScript, primarily JavaScript. Sometimes they'll do it via actually injecting, HTML, altering the DOM, if you will, but mostly rely on injecting JavaScript. If you can deploy a very good and complete content security policy on your website, you are going to mitigate all of these types of attacks on your application. And this is, I call this free. What I mean by free is there's not some product you have to buy to implement a very good and thorough content security policy. If you're not familiar with what this is, do some research. In fact, you want to know the value of it. Every one of those major breaches I just talked to you about from a MageCart perspective, the response of every one of those, in addition to other things, was to implement a content security policy. They can be difficult to build and maintain because you're basically saying, here is the content that is allowed to load on my page. Therefore, if someone spins up a new domain, neweggsstats.com, my browser will never load JavaScript from this other domain that it doesn't know about, right? Because I've said, here's the JavaScript you can run. You can be very, very granular about this. And it is very, very powerful solution to fix this. Someone has a question? Just hearing some background noise. If you're not talking, could you mute, please? Then one more thing, keep third-party policy. Keep third-party software patched up to date. A lot of this, the MageCart attacks, were going after shopping cart like Magento, and Magento had actually had patches for most of these sites that were attacked, but they hadn't updated them. So if you're using third-party software, make sure you keep it up to date because of lots of these breaches, and we see this across the industry. This isn't unique to MageCart. We see these bots, this noise of the internet, using 6-year-old exploits. Why? Because it works, because people don't patch their stuff. And then, of course, there's many security vendor solutions out there for this type of stuff. I could name a bunch. There's tons out there to kind of look for this type of DOM manipulation by JavaScript on the client side. And obviously, F5 has some solutions there as well, but there's plenty out there. Key takeaways. Differentiating what's automated traffic and what not really informs not only your business, but your security stack. So even if you can just get rid of the script kiddies, that's a big bulk of that. 95% of the malicious unwanted traffic with very simple checks of the headers. Reduce load. This affects not only performance, cost of running the application, lots of other things here. So significant business value in reducing the automatic traffic. And again, these are all relatively simple fixes to what are some very huge problems. And then significant overall risk reduction is achievable. And like I said, really at potentially a very low effort and cost to you. Again, the bot protections, there's lots of ways to do it. And then the content security policy is we'll call it a somewhat free solution there because there obviously is human effort involved and that costs money. Questions, thoughts, concerns? Looks like there's no questions already. If we had time, and Devon, you can tell me, I was going to kind of do a on-the-fly demo if someone dares to be my victim.
Ooh. All right. Well, do we have any volunteers?
Well, just anyone out there who, I'm not going to do anything bad. I'm just going to show you sort of how this malware works just by playing with developer tools in the browser. Anyone out there have a login page exposed to the internet you want me to play with?
Ooh. Come on, any takers?
Come on. I promise I won't do anything bad. I'm just going to show you how this works. I'm not going to do anything with any malware. I'm just going to manually play with the DOM. Let's see here. All right. Oh, the ISSA site. We could do that.
Thanks, Jim.
Is there a login page though?
Yeah, we don't actually have a login page on.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of websites out there, but I wanted to do it on someone's real. Oh, there is a login page. Let's go there. All right, members.issa. Perfect. All right, so we'll just do this. Let me change what I'm sharing here. If I can figure out how to do that, share something else. Google Chrome. All right, share. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah. Wait a minute. That's like the main international ISSA site. That's not like our
again, I'm not going to be doing anything bad. I'm not,
Okay.
There is no data or bad things going to go to their website. And that's really that's the reason I'm doing this demo is because okay. I'm going to be manipulating this page and
Devon did it.
They might have all the security controls in the world, but they're not going to know this is happening. So if I go here and I say inspect this out, everyone can see okay?
Yeah.
All right. So we have this input right here, which is the username field, right? I'm going to go right here and I'm going to say edit as HTML. I'm just going to copy this field. And so imagine this is that JavaScript that either got loaded through this man in the browser malware or via MageCart or something like that. And so it's injecting a new field. And right now, I'm going to call it pin, or no, let's call it SSN. Everyone can see what I'm doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to say social security number. All right. So I'm going to make this a little bit, can everyone see this? I'm not sure how this is showing up on the page. All right, good deal. All right, so now I'm going to click away from this page and you guys should see the page update. Let me actually, one more, hold on right there. All right, perfect. There we go. Well, I need to add a change there, but you see, here's this page that was asking me for my username and password, and now it's asking me for my social security number. Now, obviously, that was a quick on-the-fly demonstration of what would happen here. And you know what? Maybe this would seem weird or something to someone. So let's add some additional language here. Right here, we're going to add a whole new div, edit as HTML. We're going to copy this. We're going to edit down here. And we're going to say something more like,
You can be much more convincing next to the password you said, or last four of the social security number.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want the whole social security number, so I'm gonna ask for it. So there's a problem.
You give me the last four, I'll get you the rest of it.
Verifying, yeah, verifying your identity. Please enter the additional following information to verify your account. Good enough. I didn't fat finger that some. Who cares? But so there's a problem verifying your identity, please enter the following. And maybe I would add, say, I see I did fat finger, but maybe I would add this maybe in red text, put this down here as, a separate, and maybe add this text out to the side of it or above it. But you can see that and this is what this JavaScript would do. I'm manipulating this page, but there's nothing wrong, right? This still says it's the ISA website. And does any of the infrastructure back at their data center, wherever this is hosted, know that this is happening? Absolutely not. And when I go to submit this page, yes, this is going to go to the ISA website. And yes, I'm going to be able to get logged in. But all this information also went to the hackers command and control server. The only indication that you might get from their infrastructure side is, why is there this additional parameter being submitted? But even the JavaScript could remove those parameters and not send them to the actual site. Can you zoom into that part of the code? Sorry, you want me to zoom into the page that I manipulated. So that was Robert. You were asking what part you want me to zoom into. The password field, the username field. Oh, the browser inspector. Yeah, I think I can make that bigger. If I'm down in here, let's command plus it. Yeah, sorry, that's probably better. So all I was doing, wow, I went really big there. Hold on, let me get a little bit smaller here. Everyone can see that okay? So really all I did was take one of these form fields here. Here are the login. Here's the username field. I can expand the one that I added that was social security number. Why did it not create me a new? Oh, because it was inside of there, that's why. Yeah, so let's go right here and edit as HTML. And we'll go like this. There we go. Now it should look a little better if I zoom down. Yeah, there we go. Social security number. So I just didn't have the tags in the right spot. So now it's showing it here. I could also take this text and put it out here after or before the social security number, maybe decide to make it red, but you get the idea. That is all I have, unless there are more questions. But really all you saw was me manipulating the DOM here, and that's what the JavaScript does. It can add form fields, it can add text, it could remove text. Maybe there's some text on here that says, we'll never ask you for your PIN number, your social security number, or whatever it is I'm asking for. Great, I'll just rip that out. I mean, I can do that right here. I could just decide, you know what, I don't want any of this text that's already here. Let's edit as HTML. Let's get rid of,
Hey Joe, we had a question. He wanted, one of our attendees, Nathan Kim, wanted to know, our former president, Nathan Kim, wanted to know which lines of the added script will cause a hacker to receive a copy of the credential.
So I didn't add that in here. I would probably have to add, like on submit for this button. So the JavaScript does have to be written to take advantage of this page. So the attacker is going to do some reconnaissance, look at this page, and say, like the skimming software often say, when the credit card field loses focus, that means they probably typed in some field. Then I want to skim it right away. I'm not going to wait for them to hit the finish, submit payment button or whatever. As soon as that social security number field or that whatever, but any JavaScript event, I can say, do something. So there would be script in here that would say, just go do an HTML post to some page, right? I can't think off the top of my head what the JavaScript function is to do the, I think it's just a web request. There's a request that you load. and then you submit it. I can't think off the top of my head what it is, but it's very, very straightforward and simple. There's lots of examples if you want to go do research on MageCart of the code. And then the other thing obviously is, and this has been happening for a long time, the hackers are encrypting their traffic as well. So it's all happening inside of SSL channels. Like I said, that neweggsstats.com domain was registered like a day before they submitted the code. They compromised the code. It had an SSL certificate and everything. Everything was good and right about this. They did a very, very good job with it. Are there any browser policies that can help mitigate any? Absolutely. That's exactly what I was talking about with the content security policy. So what I can do is a content security policy can say, one, no inline JavaScript at all is allowed. It must be called remotely. So if I were to go expand this part of my web page and say, all right, so here's a script. This is an example of an inline script. So here's this, it says document ready, here's this watermark for using a password, right? These are all inline scripts. A good content security, a good application should never have inline scripts. This should get called somewhere else. And if you have to include inline scripts, then you can add either what's called a nonce or you can sign it. And all of this is controlled via the content security policy, such that if this page were to load and anyone were to try and inject additional JavaScript into this page, or even style sheets, you have control over all the different object types on this page. Here is the JavaScript that is allowed to run. The only place that you can call JavaScript for this page is from these 3 or 4 domains. And if there's any inline JavaScript, I have SHA-256 hashed it, and it's essentially a signed script or a nonce, right? All right, good deal. Any other questions? All right, I'm probably out of time now, but up to you guys. I can keep going.
No, I mean, honestly, I think you did a great job. I really appreciate the demonstration here at the end. What we're going to do now is first and foremost say thank you for a tremendous presentation. If everybody would please give a virtual clap and a thank you.